a fan of storytelling, particularly to connect customers and brands and even to connect executives. Do you think that this is a vital skill for leaders? And if so, where should they start?
I think it starts with this place of authenticity and leadership. You can't be a good storyteller if they sniff it out right at the beginning that you are pitching a story that isn't true and authentic.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Cory, and today we have with us Rebecca Grimes. She's a prominent figure in the B2B SaaS industry with more than 25 years of experience in sales and marketing. Rebecca has deep expertise in GTM strategy and a track record of driving growth for global brands. She does this through a leadership philosophy centered on creating meaningful connections between brands and their customers. And she's currently serving as the CRO of SheerID, the global leader in identity verification for commerce. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. Yeah, I'm excited to talk. And we're talking a little bit before the show about how your role is now at SheerID and how it really spans the entire revenue engine, which is something I find fascinating. I think our listeners are really going to dig into as well. But before we get into all of that, I want to step back. I want to drop the veil just a little bit here because there's not a podcast host out there that doesn't start an interview, right, with a guest by saying things like, "You've had quite the journey," or "Wow, what an intriguing career." But for you, it's true. So you started as a crime reporter, moved into marketing as so many writers do, right? Then made that jump to sales and then into roles like the CRO role now at SheerID, where you're really setting the strategy and execution for the entire go-to-market engine. What was that journey like?
Yeah, it was a broke journey in the beginning. I love journalism, and I'm so glad that I made the pivot in taking those critical skills that I learned, especially as a police and crime reporter. I covered 7 murder trials in 11 months as a kid. My college student newspaper did not quite prepare me for what I was going to encounter, and those kind of early relationships that I had to form with prosecutors and public defenders and the police department and the victims and the families of the accused, it just really required me to become an active listener and build trust and communicate stories. And that's really been kind of essential throughout my career. And so, the natural pivot into marketing was obvious for me. That's where, a lot of my undergraduate time had been spent. But I just had a constant curiosity for how revenue growth actually happens within an organization. And so, I would eventually step into the sales organization to figure out, how we really could scale that organization. And, that really led me to realize the natural friction between sales and marketing organizations in particular could be done a different way. So I've taken kind of all of those kind of critical learning skills that I acquired early, and they've carried me well throughout my career.
Yeah. And while looking at it on paper, I mean, even me myself, I was looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, you go from police and crime reporter to CRO, or even just that jump, like you said, it's a natural kind of lean in to go from a reporter with the active listening, the storytelling, all of that, to then make the jump to marketing. But then some people, myself included, might think, well, the jump to sales is maybe a little different. But I'm struck by one thing he said, because now it seems so self-evident, which is the curiosity, right? The curiosity and the active listening and the true connection with people. Then, I mean, that sounds like what you would want at the top of an interview sheet for a sales job.
Absolutely. I also, there's a natural competitiveness inside of me. And I think that some of the best sales leaders have that competitive, like, I want to win and I want to, kind of own my business and own my outcomes. And I was a salesperson in a prior life. While I was also a journalist and that wasn't quite paying the bills, I worked as an optician and I helped people, pick out glasses. And, I got an extra $25 if they spent over $1,000. And, I learned very quickly that building relationships is part of the sales process. And I think a lot of sellers have had to really evolve and hone in on their EQ skills because they don't want to buy anymore. They want to partner. And I think that curiosity of, I felt like we had, figured everything out in marketing, and why hadn't we really turned up the gas on scale? And it was because on the receiving end inside that sales organization, the leads weren't as qualified as we thought that they were, that there was still more nurturing that needed to be done. The story we were telling externally didn't translate equally into the different buyer personas that we were engaging with. And the needs of sales in the form of enablement were, again, misunderstood by marketing. And a lot of those were assets that I had created myself. And it wasn't until I was on the receiving end of, really this disconnect from marketing from the end customer that I realized that, there was a different way. And there's this traditional, you're not sending me quality leads and I don't have enough leads. And if you sent me more, I could hit my numbers. And it's like, what if we just broke that all down and said, what does good business look like for us? And let's figure out how we mutually go acquire that together. And that's what I was able to achieve. And there was this aha moment. And I, at that moment had this realization that breaking down those silos further and moving into the post sales customer experience and success, kind of the last thing for me to tackle in order for there to be kind of full centering around the customer in developing a life cycle that works inside most B2B organizations with some modifications.
It makes sense. I mean, it's easier said than done, right? But it makes a whole lot of
Yes.
sense. And I mean, that's something that we see a lot too, is that when we kind of come into an organization, sometimes we start with sales, sometimes we'll start with marketing, but the most effective are the ones where they adopt sort of a common approach to the customer everywhere from that first marketing touch all the way through, renewal sales and things like that. So stepping back now, as you have that view of the entire customer life cycle and the revenue engine, what would you say is the most gratifying part of sort of setting that strategy and helping everyone work together?
I think it starts with everybody really understanding the vision and where we're headed. I usually join organizations at some point of, change and inflection. And so, I joined SheerID about 6 months ago and really fantastic growth, but the competition was starting to increase and our value proposition needed to become stronger and the products that we offer needed to evolve. And I think that doing more of the same is what a lot of companies that are finding themselves heading into this new year with a, can we achieve that 20% year over year growth? If you're not changing and evolving, I think that that is why you're seeing a lot of the, the stagnation in some of these traditional successful B2B companies. And what my purview allows me to do is at any given point in time when we're setting the strategy is to put on the hat of the respective functional leaders that I have running sales and marketing and customer experience and revenue operations to say, what are the ways that we are going to deliver good revenue to this business? And so sometimes, requires me to shut down products that no longer are core or align to the future success, to evolve the ICP to be more aligned to the LTV to CAC of, what we aspire to achieve and breaking that down into the different ways that each one of the teams contributes to that. I'll give you a good example. Sales selling, your job is to sell things, which means you can sometimes oversell. Well, what happens is then you mismanage expectations right at the beginning of a trusted relationship with a new customer. And then we turn that over to an onboarding implementation team. And it is a very bumpy ride. So there's not a clear handoff. The salesperson got the deal done. They've moved on to their next deal that they're chasing. And the customer experience team is trying to launch this customer many times with like an oversold or a mismanaged expectation and potentially bad revenue. Like, oh, we're just using you for a point solution that we don't see a long-term play in our working relationship. And all that does is set this other team of revenue accountable leaders and individuals up for a challenge. So we work backwards all the way from the very first, like who are we attracting and who are we disqualifying before they even get to a salesperson? And then how are we documenting those conversations so that we have clear requirements that are understood, aligned. We've got mutual close plan. We're then introducing a CSM in the final stages of a process. So there's a seamless baton handoff from one team to the next, to the next, to the next. And all of that comes from a place really wanting to, excel at servicing the customer.
You described what sounded like quite the ideal system, right? Jumping all the way from marketing to having that customer success individual, join one of the final calls. So there's a seamless handoff between the two. And I'm thinking All right, that sounds great. Let's do it. But then I imagine you might encounter some hiccups, maybe some friction when you're a CRO that's selling this to the CEO or selling this to the board, that we're going to make all these changes across your entire, the lifeblood of your company. So how do you go about managing that change and doing it in a way where everyone feels confident and is on board?
I experienced this, when I joined a new organization like SheerID a few months ago. I know that this is a big change for many people who've never worked in a structure like this. And it starts with me scheduling time with everybody and listening, cross functional leaders, executives, people managers, individual contributors, everybody across the organization. And then I assess the story that data is telling. So is what I'm hearing validated by the data, or are there misconceptions or misperceptions about what good and great actually look like? And so I'm a big data driven leader as well, which means there's anecdotes and there's data, and then there's leading indicators and lagging. And so looking at all of that to collectively come together and then tell the story. And so the simplest thing for me to do is just break down the process of becoming a customer. There's a beginning, middle, and an end, and hopefully a subsequent book. And if everybody understood the role that they play in setting that customer up for success, and not just year one success, but ongoing success. And for some companies, that could be, going too far downstream into, a smaller ICP than is their normal profile of a customer. Those customers, don't operate in the same way. They require a different level of support. All of that can be distracting. But if sales is, I got to hit my quota, I'm going to sell it at all costs, then that customer experience on the other side of this is likely to result in a churn, and in oftentimes a first year churn. And so understanding the cost of what a payback period looks like, breaking down those KPIs and cross functionally sharing the rest of the team's KPIs in the form of a scorecard. So you not only understand what is in front of you from your responsibility, but the way that actually impacts another person in the revenue team is just a critical path. You can't just explain it without the why and then the demonstrable evidence of why a change is required. And so for us, we measure time from signature to go live with our solution. And for every incremental week that passes, there is deference of value creation in the mind of the customer. And so we have to operationalize on ensuring that there is no delay in contract signature through the introduction of a team for implementation and onboarding. And not just that, that there are expectations managed about what it looks like on the other side of the signature so that projects can be prioritized with IT resources internally, et cetera. And so that there are no delays in getting that customer live. Whereas, if you were to go back, a few years within this, organization, we're potentially doing some of that behavior. Let's race and get this deal closed, even if they're not ready to close it, which just means that we've set another team up for success. And same thing with marketing. When we invest in an event and we have really great conversations, and the urgent bird gets the worm, but we waited 2 weeks to start a follow up activity coming out of that event, we've lost all of that momentum and that investment that marketing team made in creating the opportunity for those conversations to happen. And so, again, I uniquely can put on all of the different hats and have a conversation with the respective teams, both collectively and individually, on what happens when we have true alignment and how, when we center on that customer, everybody actually wins and the business wins.
I love that. I don't know what to call it. Is it a mindset shift? Or when you're thinking of, when you're talking about, well, no, you're going to understand not only how this might impact sales or how this might impact customer success, it's going to impact another person, another colleague, right across the organization. So that's something that struck me. Can you talk through like how you communicate that and how you bring people on board?
Sure. We talk about healthy revenue. And I think that is something that you need to define for not only your sellers, but your existing customers as well. Because I've been a part of organizations where when we look at profitability by customer, there are entire customer segments that just don't make sense for us to not only continue to acquire, but also maintain that book of business. There, it could be a legacy product that's no longer supported that we're deprecating, or again, could be, some of the smallest customers can be the most demanding within your customer support organization because those dollars mean more to them than a larger organization. So when they invest $30,000 in your solution, they need to see an immediate ROI of that solution, and they potentially could be needier because they don't have a calibration of this is one of 15 projects that I'm running. And so for me, it really is about talking about and defining what that good, healthy revenue looks like. And when we're faced with a decision on left or right, we make the decision that's in the best interest of the customer and the business. And I think that can sometimes be hard for companies and for sellers, as a for instance, to say, so you're wanting me to walk away from this 20K deal? And I'm like, yeah, we find that customers that spend 50K and above with us actually are more successful. They behave like our long-term customers. Those other ones, we don't actually get to profitability until month 26. And so again, using that data to articulate the why behind it. It's not just a no, we're going to stop doing that. It's we're going to stop doing that because this is what the data suggests. Our efforts and resources need to be directed in a different way to support that long-term healthy revenue. And it's usually couched in creating enterprise value. And how do we create enterprise value? And obviously, we all know how hard it is to replace than it is to retain a customer. So to knowingly put customers that we will knowingly churn into the portfolio just no longer makes sense for businesses to consider. It isn't revenue at all cost anymore. It is really healthy, good, sustainable revenue that over time they will grow with you and they see you as a strategic partner and not a vendor. And that is very different than I think even the way 6 and 12 months ago the selling process looked like.
I would definitely agree. It's at all levels, like from partnering with the salesperson to partnering with the brand, with the company itself. People are looking for those
Exactly.
strategic partnerships. Yeah. And one more thing kind of struck me that I want to dive into real quickly is when you kind of talk about looking at the data, the way you're talking about leading indicators, lagging indicators, right? Looking at customer lifetime value. It's clear to me that, you've got a great strategy and the ability to dive into some pretty meaningful data. And I know that there are lots of revenue leaders probably listening to this right now who are going, wow, I wish I had that. Right. So, what would you say to people, like yourself that are working across functions, but have segmented data, right? They're having a hard time tying things together. What's the strategy in play there?
Yeah, I think that ironically, I have Measure What Matters sitting on my desk right now. I'm rereading that book. But I think that there was a time where KPIs were overanalyzed. There were, 200 KPIs that we were tracking as an organization. And it is really hard to then measure causation and correlation between all of those different metrics. And, the number of social media followers that we have as a brand is irrelevant to the core unit economics of the business. And so there is an evolution in terms of data, what do you measure and how do you measure it and the frequency of how you measure it. And a lot of folks have, in some cases with blinders, just looked more narrowly on the month or the quarter that sits in front of them. And I think that that's where a lot of companies fall short. Second half of the year's success is when you are so narrow minded and looking at what sits in front of us and the immediate goal that sits in front of us without doing a full bottoms up analysis of how are we going to achieve this plan. And you need to have like 5 different levers that if this isn't working, I'm going to go double down on this. And so, in the case of SheerID, we just went through that exercise as many organizations are, with their next fiscal year of planning. So what that looks like is, okay, so if we did nothing but increase our win rate, how confident are we in our ability to achieve our plan next year? If we were to increase the ASP of our existing customers, how many logos would we need to close this year? If our bottoms white space model suggests that this is where the expansion opportunities are in these accounts, how are we intentionally going after that expansion revenue, knowing that there's likely a faster sales cycle there than new logos? And so it's a constant, what are the drivers of that? And then how do you measure that? And what's the frequency of measurement? Because if you're not looking at these things at least weekly, if not some things daily, depending on if you're an inbound model or you're an outbound model, You could be missing a blind spot and have a really successful month or quarter, and then do the hills and valleys that some organizations find themselves in because they deplete everything that's in their pipeline, and then they're rebuilding and starting from scratch, and your sales cycles are getting longer. There are much more scrutiny. You've got a procurement team that's now involved, even in small contracts, to make sure that every dollar is spent well in these organizations. And so you can't afford to not have 10 different ways to reach your plan. So if new logos are taking longer, you need to go double down on expansion. If churn is running hot, you need to go fix your churn problem, because there isn't any amount of top of funnel activity that you can do to mitigate churn, that leaky, bucket that, that's falling out the bottom. And so you have to fully understand what good and great looks like. So you should have, how do I achieve a baseline plan? And then what upside am I looking for that will help us move faster, deliver higher confidence, and hopefully overperform in those plans? And it doesn't have to be in a fancy Looker dashboard. It can be a simple Google Sheet with links to the raw data in Salesforce or whatever your CRM is. You can actually pick 10 things that you just want to measure regularly and see those leading indicators, which are things like, how many new opportunities am I creating per week? And are they against our defined ICP? Simple, right? Like, I just want to measure that. And then the next thing is, what does my average deal cycle look like? And is it going up or down? Because I now need to probably adjust my math and my model to say, if things are going longer, I'm going to need more of them, because I'm going to need some of those that can fall into the funnel and close very fast, which means I need to go do lookalike modeling. What are the type of deals? What are the segments? What is the profile? Who are the buyers in those scenarios that can get me those green shoots? And
Yeah.
it just, it sounds complex, but it really is just about understanding what those levers are and knowing when to pivot and double down.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of people set a plan at the beginning of the year and they're plowing through that plan for the full year. And then they get to Q4 and they're like, I don't know how we got so off track. And it's because you should have been measuring everything, and you should have had a milestone check in that said, this was our hypotheses. Is it being fulfilled or not? And if the answer is no, I better pivot early, because I don't have enough runway in Q4 to make up for the first third of the year misses. And I will also say that I think a lot of people also overshoot in terms of what they think they're going to be able to deliver in the first half of the year. And especially when you're in a building or a transformation phase like we're going through at SheerID, with new product innovation coming this year, and not full confidence in how long those new products will take to be adopted by our existing customers as well as new customers. Where's that budget going to come from? All of those unknowns. If I were to factor that in it with assumptions today into the plan, I would get them all wrong. So I have to use what I have in front of me. And, I've been in organizations where, like, I think $1 million is going to come from this new product this year. And it's like, where'd you get that number? How many deals did you have to close? How many conversations did you have to have? And also, where was the budget coming from in an active budget, calendar year? Where were you getting that budget from? And when the answers peel back like that, you really find that it was more of a guess, and the confidence should have been zero. Anything that happened in year one should have just been assumed to be the overperformance to plan, not a contingent for achieving the baseline plan.
That's excellent advice. And I think the most pointed is probably if someone looks at you and says, it's going to raise X amount of revenue and it'll be easy, it'll be quick. Always take a breath and say,
Always.
how?
Yeah, and that's the curiosity. I love your enthusiasm about this. I would love nothing more than this to be a reality. Let's break this down. Would have to happen for this to be true.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start to do that, you realize there's probably four things that were considered in that. And it's not that the hypotheses needs to change. It's the assumptions that go into the hypotheses need to change. Yes, we can probably get $1 million of revenue, but the time to achieve that $1 million is probably longer than what you're thinking, because of all of these other things that we know about our existing products today.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going back. I'm sensing the tie-ins to journalism here, and I can't resist. Like examining the thinking, examining the motives, the strategies, what's going the cause and effect behind everything. And it feels like we're kind of coming back to storytelling in a bit.
Yeah.
So, and I know that you're a fan of storytelling, particularly to connect customers and brands, and even to connect executives. Do you think that this is a vital skill for leaders? And if so, where should they start?
I think it starts with this place of authenticity and leadership. You can't be a good storyteller if they sniff it out right at the beginning that you are pitching a story that isn't true and authentic. And so for me, I try to join organizations where I feel deeply connected to the work that we do, good work with good people and customers that I get out of bed every morning and I want to make them wildly successful. And so when you start with that, you find yourself with a curiosity wanting to say, what has made our existing customers so successful? And their stories are, they willingly want to share those stories with you. I've talked to 30 customers in the first 6 months since I've been here, a lot of them in person, a lot of them over lunch or coffee or dinner. And yes, it puts me on the road a lot, but it also, I uncover challenges that they had experienced before that they're like, I don't want to do that again. Noted. Or you get to beta test some thinking around, hey, I think we're moving in this direction. Is this a problem that you're also facing? We're hearing it from some of your competitors or your peers in this industry. All of that translates into how you create a sense of urgency with buyers, how you create alignment with your existing customers that might have nervousness about taking a leap. We offer a solution that some of the world's largest brands do, but a lot of the kind of mid-market and upper mid-market are like, how does this work for us as well? Yes, we know that Target every year does a teacher appreciation event for back to school and they give teachers a discount. And we power that for them to make sure that there's obviously offer protection against abuse there. But Target thinks about that teacher throughout the entire year, not just on their big event. And we help them think through that strategy by listening to what others are doing in that space and showing them examples and customers that say, I want to go be like that other brand, help us be like them. And we're like, oh, they happen to be a customer of ours as well. Let's tell you what they're doing so well and how they transform themselves. If you don't have those stories innately and authentically ingrained in you, you're going to have a really hard time with anybody actually believing in that. And so I do think that storytelling is a critical part of selling today and retaining customers. Your business champion is moving on to another company and you've got to go repitch and resell yourself. You better intimately understand where they've come in their tenure with us so that we are not considered as a circle of cut in next year's budget cycle because nobody has the context or the history of the stories of impact of our solution. And I think that equally goes on the sales side as well. So the traditional, I'm going to sit down and walk you through 15 PowerPoint slides as a very first conversation. I think we're all exhausted with that. I think we want to sit down and have a conversation and I'm going to share some pain and you're going to come back with, oh my gosh, we just worked with a customer about a year ago that was facing that exact same problem. Let me talk to you about how they approached it. And like that is very different than me reading you a case study on a slide. And I need to have that in my DNA in order for that to be authentically received and not forced upon me.
I love it. It's excellent advice. And I want to pull out 2 points because I've heard one echoed before, and that is I talk to a lot of CROs, and it seems the most effective. They all say one thing, which is talk to your customer. I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's not my job. It's like, no, that's part of your job. And it's so important because it goes back to the other train of thought that I think I heard you said, correct me if I'm wrong, please. Of like, you have to listen first to tell a good story, whether it's listening to the customers or as a salesperson saying, hey, what are your challenges? I'm not going to tell you what I think they are. Like, what are they?
Yeah, I think that I have that visceral reaction with like, as a CRO, pipeline generation must be something that keeps you up at night. It's like, obviously, that is, you could say that about anything. That doesn't get my attention. That doesn't keep me engaged and want to learn more. And I think that we need to constantly be putting ourselves in the recipient's shoes in terms of, I can have a NASCAR slide in my head and do that through storytelling without putting all the logos on a slide and look how great we are, look who we work with. I can tell that same story in examples and value creation that feels, again, more connected to that. The other point that I want to make here is, the idea that sales stops when you're done with the contract. I would argue like that's such a misnomer. And there's a renewal cycle. There's expansion of new products that are forthcoming. There are executive relationships that you want to manage because maybe it's an umbrella of a company. They've got a global presence. You only work with one of their countries. There are lots of reasons for you to listen and stay engaged. But the most important thing is just check ins when there's nothing urgent happening. So there's nothing bad that happened. There's nothing good that happened. That feels more authentic than there's a crisis. I'm going to step in as your executive sponsor and fix and save the day. Like, that's not the role I want to play in a relationship with our customer. I want to learn about what's on their roadmap for this year, how I think that that aligns with things that we might be considering or working on, and how could we better support them. And you can't do that in the height of everything's going great or oh my gosh, the floor just fell out. You have to just do that in a regular cadence so that you're not over indexing on any one piece of feedback or information.
Yeah, that's another piece of awesome advice. It's something our CEO, Julie Thomas, says often. So don't conflate usage of a platform of a service with things going well, right? Actually talk to the customer. When it's already gone
Exactly.
bad, and it's not too late, but it's harder, right? Or even when it's going well, like what can we
It's more
do
emotional when things are
better?
going bad.
Yeah.
Like usually things are going bad and somebody in your customer is on the receiving end of heat. And
Yeah.
so, they're potentially redirecting that at you, even pushing you to help them with a resolution, even if it might be out of your control and scope in solving for that. But, the last thing that I will say on, the way that relationships matter, and I will go back to, my sales role when I was, with the team and carrying a bag. I lost a deal twice. It broke my heart. I don't like 2 years in a row, we were up for this business and we didn't win it. And the way that you have enterprise sales, you build relationships with the buyers. It felt like a breakup. Like, how I'm not going to get to talk to you every day. We're really not moving forward with this. Through that relationship that I could have burned and just been like, fine, go again and fail and wish you all the best. No, I stayed in touch and we would eventually win that logo. And we just had a customer return to us in December that we lost 4 years ago, but we have been servicing them through thought leadership and innovation and nurturing them through the last 4 years in case that didn't work out, whatever their plan B alternative to not using us was. And I think that a lot of customers expect you to be kind at all stages during the breakups, during the no's, during the this budget got cut and I'm sorry we can't move forward. When you meet them with, it's okay. We're going to, offboard you and we wish you nothing but success. If it's okay, we're going to keep you in our database because we want to make sure, that all of our thoughts and learnings are still, top of mind and in the forefront of you. I think that customer relationship that you build authentically only works on the other side for boomerang or close lost opportunities to come back to life if it actually mattered and was prioritized and was not a selling process for them.
And it sounds like what you're describing there in both those instances is what it means to be truly buyer first or truly customer centric. And unfortunately, I feel like it's a little bit of a buzzword, right? That's been around for maybe the last 5 years, really
Yeah.
heavily pushed. But what would you say to other revenue leaders that are really trying to reach that point that you're at to really be truly customer centric? What kind of mindset shifts need to take place?
Yeah, for me, I refer to it as customer obsessed. And what I mean by that is I get excited when I see my solution out in the wild. I talk about it, I share it, I feel a sense of pride. And through that, customer obsession means that I want everything to go as expected. I want our customers to be wildly successful, for our prospects to become customers so that they can be wildly successful. And what that cannot just be something that you say, it has to be ingrained in practice, in the way that you operationalize and execute within your organization, in the way that you run your QBRs, which is, intentionally designed to be pushing our customers in new and different ways instead of just status quo. My favorite things are when, our key contacts are promoted because that means we're doing something well. And that for me is what this customer obsession looks like, is truly believing that there is value in what you deliver. And that comes through in every interaction that they have with every person in your organization. And that could be the customer support specialist that is resolving a ticket for you, all the way through a conversation with me. And I will say that my favorite organizations are when everybody understands that they own and touch revenue. And so ultimately, yes, I'm the CRO. I am accountable at the end of the day for the revenue targets of the business, new business expansion, churn, et cetera. I am accountable at the end of the day. But I was sitting with our product and tech team for a fireside chat about a month ago, and they were asking just such curious, great questions about, my new vision for the go to market model and how are we thinking about the ICP evolution. And at the end, I was like, I just have a quick question. Who do you think owns revenue in the organization? And they all raised their hands. And I was like, oh my God, like virtual high five across the Zoom meeting, because that culture cannot just live within the revenue team. And so as companies are trying to really figure out how to be customer centric or customer obsessed, it cannot be done in a silo. It has to be something that ripples and is felt, and that those customer stories of success are shared. And when something goes wrong, everybody feels an accountability to resolve and fix that issue across the organization with a sense of urgency. And that requires top down leadership at the CEO level saying, we all own revenue. Everything that we do either creates a promoter or detractor from this business. I'm sure how many times do you have a key contact that leaves? They have a fantastic experience. They want to be the hero in the next organization. They call you up in month one and say, I'm ready to bring you over here and get started with us. Let's get a call scheduled, right? Like that actually matters. And that's what true customer centric and customer obsession is that there is a word of mouth impression of you that is better than you could ever articulate yourself. And it's what people say about you when you're not in the room that you should really be thinking about when you're building a customer centric and customer obsessed organization.
It seems that so many people and so many brands try to control that story a little bit too much. But as you said, when you're not in the room, if they want to say it, they're going to say it better than you ever could.
Yeah. And they're going to talk about you and say it to other folks as well. And, I think that we're going to start to see a shift in 2025 of, really word of mouth validation of solutions and B2B becoming more important than ever. And, the way that leaders can, lean into that is through offering up early references when a deal is stuck. Like, hey, I know you might be hesitant. This is a big investment and a priority that you're considering this year. Can I introduce you to a couple of folks that were exactly in your shoes with that same hesitation? References don't need to be the pricing and proposal and contracting final stage of a process. And again, what they say about you, you need to be confident what they're going to say about you to even offer that up. And if you're not, go do the work so that you can offer that up. That is a critical lever that I think most organizations underutilize. And you only have permission to do that if it actually is a great partnership.
I'm glad you brought up looking to the future because that's something I want to get into, especially because a lot of our conversation has focused around storytelling, focused around alignment, and actually, in some cases, paring back activity, right? Not just going after everyone. If this person isn't our ICP or we know that they're going to churn because they're a 20K client, not a 50K and above client a year from now, we got to stop that. So I think, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about AI, right? And there seems to be a lot of conflation between, well, is this storytelling or is this just more content? And then on the sales side, like we're putting more out there, but are we having more quality conversations? So looking to the future with that kind of in the background, what do you anticipate the other big shifts will be for 2025 and the next few years down the road?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of value in AI in revenue organizations. And we're Gong Shop, and the Ask Me Anything feature in Gong, not paid sponsor or partner there. Isn't the positive things. It's you should be using that in a way to say, why am I going to lose this opportunity? What are the yellow lights that I ran through that you see? How do I get out of being single threaded when I've got this blocker? Like you have to be putting in the work into the tool in order for it to actually work for you. It is fantastic and powerful, but it will never replace building authentic connections and doing your own research about a company or a brand or an individual. Like those are all things that matter and they will always matter. And AI isn't going to be able to replace that. But we know that it is getting increasingly harder for you to be a brand that isn't doing all of your research before you've ever reached out to that company. And that's where, using AI, tell me what you know about our company. What has been your perception of us? Go scan the reviews and tell us what our strengths and weaknesses are compared to our competitors. Like, really deeply understand using tools, how to position yourself better, how your competitors are positioning you. Do the closed loss interviews, do the closed won interviews. Understand why people are deciding to invest in you and are leaving you or deciding to not move forward, which oftentimes is do nothing. Great. That's an interesting data point. What could I have done differently? What was the compelling event? AI, go help me find a compelling event to go back to them in 3 months and try to restart this conversation and climb up with the information that I already have. And so I do think that this future is going to be one where we just get smarter about placing our bets on the deals that are winnable. And that will actually materially shift what your pipeline coverage is going to be, which means your win rate needs to go up. And so all of these things, I would rather have 2.5x pipeline coverage and a 50% win rate after a proposal is delivered than 5x pipeline and I'm stuck at stage 2 in discovery and I can't get out of it. Like, you really need to be focused on what is winnable and what is not over your skis. Yes, you can market a little bit ahead of where you're at, but brands are expecting when you tell them you can do something that you actually can do that for them tomorrow. And so getting that right and also using AI to go scan everything that you know and do some research is helpful. I think that there's a misconception that AI is going to replace salespeople. I actually don't think that that is true. Customer success individuals are also salespeople in their own regard. They're constantly reselling the value of the business. That is nothing that can be replaced without like deep understanding and intimacy with that brand about what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what people are saying about them to pull that all together into cohesive story. So again, I think the future looks something like we are just being smarter about how we leverage AI tools. But I will also say the other thing that I think folks are sometimes underlooking in this sales process is that your customers are always looking for you to be smarter than them. Your prospects, like, teach me something, help me evangelize this internally, especially when you're creating a moment of consideration like we do at SheerID. There's usually not a rip and replace. I've worked in those big, we're going to, rip and replace. You're on a 3-year contract, 12 months. But like, I've worked in those places. It's complex and it is hard. And you need to be even way smarter about that than you've ever been before. And that's where AI can help kind of fill in those blanks. But I would argue that the customers that expect you to be smarter are going to look for those examples, those demonstrable examples that you have in your database. And if you're not using AI to support lookalike modeling as well, help me go find the deals that closed in 4 months and not 6 months. And you're mining your database and you're going and replicating that success and enabling your teams to replicate that success. Those are all things that I think in the next 5 years, quality over quantity is going to be the name of the game. And I think that we swung really hard with a spray and pray. And I've got to send 100 emails into an organization and they'll all get forwarded to a decision maker. And eventually somebody will respond. That goes directly into block and spam in my inbox, quite honestly. I'm not interested in that. I'm not even interested in somebody that reaches out and is like, go Leathernecks because I went to Western Illinois. I went to maybe a couple football games. Like, I'm not a sports person. Like, I'm a very Googleable person. Go find out a lot of information about me and come to the table with something really relevant and meaningful. You will get my attention. And I think that is how the future is going to look. It is, shout out to Samantha McKenna, show me you know me is really, I think, where people are winning today. And that quality over quantity, when you do that exceptionally well, you don't need to have a pipeline that is 5x. You just need to have the right decision makers and a mutual close plan in place that aligns to problems that you're solving for that customer.
Like so many things, it all comes back to intention and strategy, right?
Yep, exactly.
And to wrap up the show, Rebecca, we ask every guest 2 questions. And I feel like this is going to be a good segue because you already told us what gets us blocked and sent to spam when we're reaching out to you. But what would capture your attention? What would earn time on your calendar?
Not making assumptions about the problems that I have inside my organization, coming with a curiosity where you've done research about me and the company, and you really believe and can demonstrably get my attention with examples, similar problems that you're assuming I have in the form of, I just wanted to share something fantastic that we accomplished for ABC Company. I know you might not even be in the consideration cycle right now, but if it's okay with you, I'd love to just continue to keep you informed of things that I think are super relevant and interesting. And if it makes sense for us to connect, I'd love to earn, the right to ask for that at a later date. And so it's more of a soft sell where you're coming in from an education, a thought leadership. I don't have all the answers. I'm not making assumptions about what your business is. You are building a relationship before there is one. That gets my attention. That keeps me enough interested that you don't get block spam. I'm going to pay attention. And then you're going to follow up with a LinkedIn message, or you're going to comment on something that I post about, and you're going to build a relationship with me that makes me feel like I'm not going to be pitch slapped immediately as I engage and have a conversation. Don't do that either. Don't send
Yes.
me a connection on LinkedIn and then immediately come in with the pitch. Don't do that. At least engage with me at a different level before you do that. So,
Right. Yes. Can we please stop that? We'll just, if we could do
yeah.
nothing else, that would be a great
It'd be
leap forward.
fantastic if there was an archive and go unfollow that, like disconnect from that person, like feature in LinkedIn, because it's hard. I get it. Sales is hard, but
Yeah.
spray and pray is not how people are winning this year. It just isn't.
It's hard to hear, especially when you're in the trenches and you've got someone over you that is demanding that activity of 100
Activity.
emails a day.
I can appreciate that, but I think that if I were an SDR or BDR today, I would be focused on quality of conversation and maybe educating my manager in terms of some evolved metrics that should be considered. Because if I'm hitting my targets and I'm doing 25% of the activity to get that done, that doesn't mean I have 75% more bandwidth. That means I'm doing a lot of research. I am doing a lot of intentional follow up. I am curating content bespoke to that organization. And that's how I'm delivering the results. And I came up in those days where it was quantity over quality. And we can't operate that way anymore. Buyers don't have the time. They just
Yep.
don't anymore. So,
Yep. They do not. All right. Speaking of time, final question. I want to be mindful of
yes.
time. If you had one piece of advice, one burning piece of advice after this conversation to share with revenue leaders, what would it be and why?
I would say stay curious and challenge the status quo. Growth does not come from playing it safe. Take smart risks, learn from failure, use data to make decisions where you can, and, ultimately put the customer at the center of everything that you do and do that exceptionally well and have that be the thing that you are known for in addition to your product or solution.
Wow. Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming on the show. I know I'm going to be really excited when this one comes out because I was sad I couldn't take notes. I learned a lot. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you as well. It was a pleasure being here.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.